Snow fell like whispers over the town of Larkspur that morning, quiet but cruel, dusting the rooftops, veiling the crooked fences, and settling on the bowed shoulders of a girl no one ever noticed. Nia Redbird walked with her shawl pulled tight, her hands red and raw from the cold. In her basket, a loaf of bread still warm enough to remind her she had made something good today. Yet the warmth did not follow her. It never did. The women on the porch of the general store watched her pass, their laughter thin and sharp as icicles. "Ugly thing, ain't she?" one said behind a gloved hand. "Think she'll trap a man with flour and pity?" Nia heard it. She always did. Shame was no stranger, it rode beside her like a shadow. But she kept her eyes lowered, her step steady, her voice silent. Her mother used to say, "A woman's worth isn't in her face, it's in her hands." Nia had tried to believe that, but belief was a fragile thing when you lived in a town that traded beauty like gold. She passed the blacksmith shop, where the air smelled of iron and ash. A wagon wheel turned slowly in the snow, creaking like a tired prayer. Across the street, men spoke of cattle and winter feed, their voices carrying easily, their laughter loud. Among them, she saw a man who didn't join their noise, a tall figure with a dark coat dusted white, reins in one hand, hat brim low. His name, whispered often with admiration or envy, was Caleb Rourke. The rancher who'd lost his wife to a fever 3 winters ago. The man with too much land, too much money, and not enough joy to fill it. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, though she quickly looked away. Still, that glance lingered with her, something steady, not cruel, not pitying. Just seeing. By sundown, the tavern was warm with lamplight and gossip. A new sign had been nailed to the post outside, the ink still wet and running in the snow. Cook wanted, winter work at Rourke Ranch. Room and board. Pay fair. Every woman in town saw it. None went near it. They said the Rourke Ranch was cursed, that no woman stayed there long, that the cowboy was kind but cold, the kind of man who built fences not just around land but around his heart. Nia stood in front of that sign for a long time, her basket empty now, her stomach hollow. Behind her, a few men left the saloon, their boots crunching ice. One of them, the barkeep, paused to sneer. "You think he'll hire you, girl? He don't need a wife, and sure don't need a homely cook." The words struck like wind through thin cloth, but she only said softly, "No one marries ugly girl, sir, but I can cook." The barkeep laughed, and the sound followed her down the dark road like a curse. That night, Nia sat in her small cabin beyond the creek, her breath misting in the dim light of the lantern. The wind rattled the window panes, and her reflection trembled in the glass, eyes too wide, mouth too plain, a face people remembered only to mock. She folded her mother's shawl tighter, whispering prayers in the old tongue. The snow outside glowed faintly blue under the moon, and she thought of that sign, of the ranch far beyond town, and the man whose eyes had not turned away. By dawn, she had made her choice. The journey to the Rourke Ranch was 10 miles through drifts that came to her knees. The wind clawed her face, but she didn't stop. Her mother had crossed plains once to follow her heart. Nia could cross snow for the chance to live. When she finally reached the gates, she stood trembling, her shawl crusted with frost. The ranch lay quiet and vast before her, with smoke rising from the chimney, the corral half buried, the world holding its breath. She knocked once on the door and nearly turned back when footsteps echoed inside. It was him. Caleb Rourke. Taller up close, his eyes the color of weathered cedar. He looked at her with the wary calm of a man who had seen too much winter and trusted too little spring. "You lost, miss?" "No, sir." Her voice was hoarse, cracked by cold. "I came about the cooking." He glanced past her to the empty horizon, as if expecting someone else. "You came alone?" "Yes." She hesitated, her hands twisting around the hem of her shawl. "No one marries ugly girl, sir, but I can cook." The words left her mouth like something torn from the heart. She waited for laughter, for the familiar sting. But none came. Caleb's brow furrowed. He studied her face, not the kind of look men gave women in this town, but the way a man studies a truth he almost missed. For a long breath, the only sound was the snow tapping the roof. "Can you make bread?" he asked finally. She nodded. "Then come in. The storm's building." He stepped aside, and the lantern light spilled golden across the snow, reaching her feet like warmth returned. Inside, the house smelled of smoke and pine sap. Everything was orderly, but lonely, a place kept by a man who no longer expected company. She moved quietly through the kitchen, hands finding their rhythm. Flour, salt, water, patience. The air filled with the smell of home. Caleb watched her in silence, the corners of his eyes softening. As the blizzard rose outside, they shared supper by the fire. She ate little, speaking less. He asked where she learned to cook, and she told him about her mother, about the winters on the reservation when food was scarce but love was not. He nodded, listening like a man who had forgotten how. When the wind screamed against the walls, she flinched. He noticed. "It won't break through," he said quietly. "This place holds." Something in the way he said it made her believe him. Days passed, the snow deepening until the world beyond the windows disappeared. They lived in a hush of firelight and routine. She rose early, baked bread, mended shirts, tended to the horses when the storm allowed. He worked the forge, brought in wood, spoke more each day. Sometimes, he caught her humming while she stirred the stew. The sound stirred something long dormant in him. At night, she read by the hearth, an old Bible missing half its pages. He would sit nearby, pretending to work but really listening to her voice. When she laughed one evening at a story he told, it startled them both. The sound hung in the air like sunlight after long dark. That night, the blizzard howled with fury. Nia ran to bolt the shutters, the fire casting her shadow large against the wall. Caleb rose to help, catching her hand as the window slammed. For a moment, they stood close, breath mingling in the cold. Her pulse fluttered under his fingers. "You're not ugly," he said, the words low and certain. "You're the first honest thing I've seen in years." She froze, eyes glistening in the firelight. Then the wind roared again, drowning the silence between them. Outside, the snow swallowed the world whole. Inside, something began to thaw. And as the lanterns flickered, Nia realized, this storm might bury the past, but it could also make room for something new to grow when the thaw finally came.